David never believed in aliens. He was a practical man who worked with rockets and satellites. His job at the government facility was to create better engines for space travel every day. He worked with numbers and equations, trying to make spacecraft go faster and farther. It was a cold October night in 2019. David was driving home from work on a lonely desert road in Nevada. The highway stretched for miles with nothing but sand and rocks on both sides. He had made this drive hundreds of times before, but tonight felt different. His car started making strange noises around midnight. The engine coughed and sputtered like an old man. Trying to catch his breath, David pulled over to the side of the road and turned off the engine. The silence was complete. No other cars, no city lights. Just the vast desert under a blanket of stars. He tried to restart the car, but nothing happened. The battery was dead. His phone had no signal. David sat in his car, wondering what to do next. The nearest town was 50 miles away, and walking in the desert at night was dangerous. As he waited, David noticed something odd in the sky. At first, he thought it was an airplane, but the lights were too bright and moved in ways that didn't make sense. The lights danced across the sky like fireflies, changing colors from blue to white to green. David got out of his car to get a better look. The lights were getting closer and bigger. What he saw next made his heart race. It wasn't an airplane or a helicopter. It was something he had never seen before. The object was huge, bigger than a football field. It was shaped like a triangle, but with rounded edges. The surface looked smooth like glass, and it made no sound at all. Bright lights covered the bottom, creating patterns that seemed to pulse with a rhythm. David stood frozen, watching as the massive craft slowly descended toward the desert floor. His mind tried to make sense of what he was seeing. As a rocket scientist, he knew about every type of aircraft that existed. This was nothing like anything humans had built. The craft landed about 100 yards away from David's car. The lights dimmed, and a door opened in the side of the ship. David's first instinct was to run, but his legs wouldn't move. He was too scared and too curious at the same time. 3 figures emerged from the ship. They were tall, about 7 feet, with long arms and legs. Their skin seemed to glow with a soft light, like moonlight on water. Their heads were larger than human heads, with big eyes that sparkled like stars. The beings moved toward David with slow, graceful steps. He expected to feel afraid, but instead, he felt calm. Something in his mind told him they meant no harm. It was like hearing a voice without words, a feeling without touch. The tallest of the 3 beings stopped in front of David. When it looked at him, David felt a strange sensation in his head. Suddenly, he could understand what the being was trying to tell him, even though no words were spoken. "We have been watching you," the voice said in his mind. "Your work is important to us." David was confused. How could these beings know about his work? His projects were secret, classified by the government. He worked on advanced propulsion systems, trying to create engines that could take humans to distant planets. The being continued, "Your equations, your calculations about space travel, they are exactly what we need. Our home planet is dying, and we need your knowledge to save our people." David learned that these beings called themselves Zephyrians. They came from a planet far away, where their sun was slowly burning out. They had been traveling through space for many years, looking for a way to save their world. The Zephyrian explained that they had been watching Earth's scientific progress for decades. They were waiting for someone to develop the right mathematical formulas for faster-than-light travel. David's work was the breakthrough they had been hoping for. "But I work on rockets for space missions," David said, speaking out loud for the first time. "How can that help save an entire planet?" The being's large eyes seemed to smile. "Your understanding of energy and motion is deeper than you realize. The equations you created last month contain the key to moving entire populations across vast distances of space." David remembered the project he had been working on. It was a theoretical engine design that could bend space and time. His supervisors had called it impossible, but David had continued working on it anyway. He never imagined that his work could help save an alien civilization. The 3 Zephyrians led David toward their ship. As they walked, They explained more about their situation. Their planet had millions of inhabitants, and they had only a few years before their sun died completely. They needed to move their entire civilization to a new world, but they lacked the technology to transport so many people across such vast distances. David's equations provided the solution they had been searching for. With his mathematical framework, they could build ships capable of carrying thousands of people at speeds that would make interstellar travel possible. As they reached the ship, David realized that his broken-down car on a lonely desert road had led to the most important moment of his life. His work, which he had thought was just theoretical, was about to save millions of lives on a distant world. The Zephyrian ship was unlike anything David had ever imagined. The door opened silently, revealing an interior that seemed to be alive. The walls glowed with soft light, and the air felt fresh and clean. Everything was curved and flowing, like being inside a giant seashell. "Will you come with us?" the lead Zephyrian asked. "We want to show you something that will change your life forever." David looked back at his broken car, then at the magnificent ship before him. He knew that stepping inside would change everything, but he also knew that some opportunities come only once in a lifetime. He took a deep breath and stepped into the ship, not knowing that this decision would lead to the most difficult choice he would ever have to make. Inside the alien ship, David felt like he was walking through a dream. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting gently like living tissue. Soft blue light flowed through patterns that looked like veins, creating a warm and peaceful atmosphere. The floor felt soft under his feet, almost like walking on clouds. The lead Zephyrian guided David through corridors that curved and twisted in impossible ways. Sometimes they walked on what seemed like the floor, and other times they walked on what should have been the ceiling. But somehow, David never felt dizzy or confused. The ship seemed to know which way was up. "Your human physics cannot explain our technology," the Zephyrian said, reading David's thoughts. "We learned long ago that reality is much more flexible than most species realize." They entered a large chamber that took David's breath away. The room was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. But these weren't ordinary stars. They moved and danced, forming patterns that told stories of distant worlds and ancient civilizations. In the center of the room sat an elderly Zephyrian who radiated wisdom and authority. His skin glowed brighter than the others, and his eyes held the depth of someone who had seen countless centuries pass by. "Welcome, David of Earth," the elder said. "I am Velter, the leader of this expedition. We have traveled far to find you." David still couldn't believe what was happening. A few hours ago, he was a simple engineer with a broken car. Now he was talking to the leader of an alien civilization inside a spacecraft that defied every law of physics he knew. Velter explained more about their situation. The Zephyrian homeworld was called Ethereal, a beautiful planet with floating cities and crystal forests. But their sun was dying faster than they had expected. They had maybe 3 years before their world became uninhabitable. "Your equations," Velter continued, "they are the key to our survival. With your mathematical framework, we can build evacuation ships that will carry our people to a new world. You have given us hope when we thought all was lost." David felt overwhelmed by the responsibility. His theoretical work, which he had developed just for the challenge of solving complex problems, was now the lifeline for an entire civilization. "But why me?" David asked. "Surely there are other scientists who could help you." Velter's expression grew serious. "We have been monitoring Earth's scientific progress for 50 years. Many of your people are intelligent, but few have the unique combination of creativity and mathematical precision that you possess. Your mind works differently, David. You see solutions where others see only problems." The elder Zephyrian stood up and walked to a section of the wall. He placed his hand on what looked like a smooth surface, and suddenly the wall became transparent. David could see into another chamber where two young Zephyrian females sat waiting. "This brings us to why we brought you here tonight," Velter said. "According to our customs, when someone saves our civilization, they must be rewarded. It is not just tradition, it is sacred law. David looked at the two females through the transparent wall. Both were beautiful in an otherworldly way, with the same glowing skin and large eyes as the other Zephyrians. But each had unique features that made them special. One had silver hair that seemed to move on its own, flowing like water even when there was no breeze. Her eyes were the color of deep ocean, and when she moved, David noticed that small objects around her seemed to respond to her presence. The other had golden hair that sparkled like starlight. Her eyes were amber, and David could swear he saw images flickering in them, like watching scenes from a movie played at super speed. Their names are Lyra and Zara, Velter explained. Both are among our most gifted individuals. Lyra can manipulate matter at the molecular level. She can change the structure of materials with just her thoughts. Zara has the ability to perceive time differently. She can see potential futures and even slow down or speed up time in small areas. David was amazed. These weren't just alien visitors. They were beings with abilities that seemed like magic to human understanding. They have both volunteered to leave our world and live with you on Earth, Velter continued. This is our gift to you, but according to our laws, you must choose only one. David felt his heart sink. He looked at the two females, who were now looking back at him through the transparent wall. In their eyes, he saw hope mixed with resignation. They both knew that one of them would be chosen and the other would be left behind. I don't understand, David said. Why can I only choose one? Velter walked back to his chair and sat down. Heavily, our society is built on balance, David. For thousands of years, we have maintained harmony by ensuring that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. If we allow you to take both females, it would create an imbalance that could destabilize our entire civilization. But they're not objects, David protested. They're intelligent beings with their own feelings and desires. Yes, they are. Velter agreed, and they both understand the importance of this choice. They have accepted that only one can go. David looked again at Lyra and Zara. Lyra had stood up and was demonstrating her ability, turning a metal rod into what looked like a flowering plant. Zara was sitting quietly, but David could see her eyes flickering as she watched different possible futures unfold. What happens to the one who isn't chosen? David asked. She will return to Ethereal with us, Velter said. She will live out her days knowing that she was willing to sacrifice everything for the salvation of her people. David felt the weight of the decision crushing down on him. How could he choose between two beings who had both given up everything for his sake? How could he condemn one to a life of wondering what might have been? I need to meet them, David said. I need to talk to them before I can make this choice. Velter nodded. Of course. But remember, David, you have until sunrise to decide. Our ship must leave before your government discovers our presence here. As they walked toward the chamber where Lyra and Zara waited, David's mind raced. He had always been good at solving complex problems, but this wasn't a mathematical equation. This was about the lives and hearts of real beings. The wall dissolved as they approached, and David found himself face to face with the two females who would change his life forever. Both looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. Hello, David, Lyra said, her voice like wind, chimes in a gentle breeze. We have been waiting to meet the person who saved our world. We know this is difficult for you, Zara added, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to come from multiple timelines. But we want you to know that we are both grateful, regardless of your choice. David looked at these two remarkable beings and realized that his answer would affect not just his own life, but the destiny of everyone involved. The choice seemed impossible, but as he studied their faces, an idea began to form in his mind, an idea that would shock everyone in the room. David spent the next hour talking with Lyra and Zara. The more he learned about them, the harder his decision became. These weren't just alien beings with special powers. They were individuals with dreams, fears, and hopes just like any human. Lyra told him about her childhood on Ethereal, where she had learned to shape matter by watching the crystal forest grow. She had always been curious about other worlds and had dreamed of exploring the universe. When she heard about the mission to Earth, she volunteered immediately. I want to learn about your world, she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I want to see your oceans and mountains. I want to understand how humans create art and music. There's so much beauty in the universe, and I've only seen a small part of it. Zara had a different story. She had discovered her time abilities by accident when she was young, during a dangerous storm on their planet. She had slowed down time to save a group of children who were trapped in a collapsing building. Ever since then, she had used her gift to help others. I see many possible futures, Zara explained. Some are bright and hopeful, others are dark and scary. But in all the futures where I come to Earth with you, I see wonderful things happening. Not just for me, but for both our species. David was torn. Lyra's enthusiasm and curiosity reminded him of his own love for discovery and learning. But Zara's wisdom and her ability to see the future could help humanity in ways he couldn't imagine. As dawn approached, Velter returned to check on David's decision. The old Zephyrian looked tired, as if the weight of his people's survival was wearing him down. Have you made your choice? Velter asked. David stood up and looked at both Lyra and Zara. Then he looked at Velter with a determination that surprised everyone in the room. I have, David said. I choose both of them. The silence that followed was deafening. Velter's glowing skin flickered as if he had been shocked by an electric current. Lyra and Zara looked at each other, then at David, their expressions mixing hope with disbelief. That is not possible, Velter said slowly. Our laws are clear. The reward must be balanced. One choice, one companion. Then your laws are wrong. David said, his voice growing stronger. You came to me because my mind works differently. Because I see solutions where others see problems. Well, here's my solution. I refuse to abandon either of them. Velter's eyes flashed with something between anger and confusion. You do not understand the consequences of what you're asking. Our society has maintained balance for thousands of years. If we make an exception for you, it could destroy everything we've built. Or it could make you stronger, David countered. You said my equations saved your civilization because I refused to accept that faster-than-light travel was impossible. Maybe it's time to question some of your other impossible rules. Other Zephyrians began to gather in the chamber, drawn by the commotion. David could feel their thoughts pressing against his mind. Like whispers in a crowded room, some were angry, others were curious, and a few seemed excited by his defiance. You're asking me to choose between two people who have both sacrificed everything for your cause. David continued. How's that balanced? How's that fair? If my work is truly worth saving your entire species, then surely it's worth reconsidering. One outdated law. A younger Zephyrian stepped forward from the crowd. He has a point, she said. The old ways brought us to the edge of extinction. Maybe we need new ways to survive. Silence. Velter commanded, but David could see doubt creeping into his eyes. The balance must be maintained. What balance? David asked. You're about to lose your entire world. Your people are scattered across space, desperate for a new home. This isn't about balance anymore. It's about survival and doing what's right. Lyra suddenly stood up. I have an idea, she said. What if we create a new kind of balance? Instead of following the old rule of one choice, what if we create a new rule? A rule that says when someone saves an entire civilization, they deserve to have their heart's desire, not just what tradition allows. Zara nodded enthusiastically. I can see the future timelines. She said, in the futures where only one of us goes to Earth, there's sadness and regret. But in the futures where we both go, there's joy and discovery. New possibilities open up that don't exist in any other timeline. The crowd of Zephyrians began to murmur among themselves. David could sense their thoughts becoming more divided. The younger ones seemed excited by the possibility of change, while the older ones clung to tradition. You're talking about revolution, Velter said, his voice heavy with worry. You're asking us to abandon the principles that have kept our society stable for millennia. I'm asking you to evolve, David replied. Every species that survives learns to adapt. Maybe this is your chance to become something better than you were before. A middle-aged Zephyrian pushed through the crowd. I am Kethra, a historian, she announced. I have studied our laws for centuries. The rule about balance was created during a time of war, when resources were scarce and every decision meant life or death. But we are no longer at war. We are refugees seeking a new beginning. The law exists for a reason, Velter insisted, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Yes, it does, Kethra agreed. But reasons change. Our situation has changed. Maybe our laws should change too. David looked around the room at the faces of the Zephyrians. He could see the conflict in their expressions. These were people who had lived by the same rules for thousands of years, and he was asking them to throw away everything they believed in. I'm not asking you to abandon your principles, David said softly. I'm asking you to expand them. You believe in balance, and I respect that, but maybe true balance isn't about rigid rules. Maybe it's about making choices that honor everyone involved. Lyra stepped closer to David. If you choose both of us, we promise to work together to help both our species. We won't compete or create conflict. We'll be partners in building a bridge between your world and ours. Sarah joined them, and I can use my abilities to help guide us toward the best possible future for everyone. Not just for humans, not just for Zephyrians, but for both species working together. The room fell silent as everyone considered their words. David could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on all of them. He had challenged not just a law, but an entire way of thinking that had defined their civilization. Finally, Velter spoke. What you're asking for has never been done before. If we agree to this, we cannot predict the consequences. It could lead to chaos among our people. Or it could lead to something wonderful, David said. The greatest discoveries in human history happened when someone was brave enough to try something that had never been done before. Velter looked at the crowd of Zephyrians, then at Lyra and Zara, and finally at David. You have challenged us in ways we never expected, he said slowly. Perhaps that is exactly what we needed. The old leader closed his eyes and remained silent for a long moment. When he opened them again, David saw something new there, hope mixed with determination. We will vote, Velter announced, but understand this, if we agree to your request, everything changes, not just for you, but for all of us. Are you prepared for that responsibility? David looked at Lyra and Zara, then at the assembled Zephyrians. He thought about his quiet life as an engineer, and how it was about to become something extraordinary and unpredictable. Yes, he said without hesitation, I'm ready. The vote took 3 hours. David watched as groups of Zephyrians gathered in circles, their minds connecting in ways he couldn't understand. Waves of light passed between them as they shared thoughts and emotions. Sometimes the light was bright and hopeful, other times it flickered with worry and fear. Finally, Velter stood before the assembly. His ancient face showed the weight of the decision they had made, by a narrow margin. He announced, We have decided to honor your request, but this comes with conditions. The arrangement will last for 1 Earth year. During this time, we will observe how this choice affects both species. If it brings harmony, we will consider changing our laws permanently. If it brings chaos, the experiment ends. David felt relief wash over him, but he also sensed the enormous responsibility that came with their decision. Lyra and Zara looked at him with grateful eyes, but he could see they understood the pressure too. There's one more thing, Velter continued. This decision has created divisions among our people. Some see it as necessary evolution. Others view it as dangerous rebellion. We must return to our homeworld to deal with these consequences. You 3 will be on your own. Within hours, David found himself back on Earth with Lyra and Zara. The Zephyrian ship had dropped them off near a small town in Colorado, far from the desert where everything had started. David's old life felt like a distant memory. The first challenge was practical. How do you explain to glowing, 7-foot-tall beings to human society? David rented a remote cabin in the mountains, hoping to keep them hidden while they figured out their next steps. But hiding turned out to be harder than expected. Lyra's molecular manipulation abilities caused strange effects wherever she went. Plants grew faster around her. Metal objects changed shape without warning. Electronics malfunctioned in unpredictable ways. Zara's time abilities were even more problematic. Sometimes she would accidentally slow down time when she got excited, causing clocks to run backwards. Other times, she would speed up her own timeline, making her appear to teleport from one place to another. "I'm sorry," Lyra said after accidentally turning their wooden table into what looked like a crystal sculpture. "I'm still learning to control my abilities in Earth's environment. Your planet's energy patterns are different from ours." David was patient, but he realized they needed help. He called his old friend Jake, a former military officer who now worked in private security. Jake had always been good at keeping secrets, and David trusted him completely. When Jake arrived at the cabin and saw Lyra and Zara, his first reaction was to reach for his weapon, but David quickly explained the situation. It took several hours and a demonstration of their abilities before Jake finally believed the incredible story. "You realize the government is going to want to study them," Jake said. "When they find out about this, they'll never leave you alone." Jake was right. Within a week, unmarked vehicles started appearing near the cabin. David knew they had to move. Using Jake's connections, they were located to a safe house in Canada, then to a remote property in Alaska. But the constant moving was taking its toll. David had to quit his job, which meant losing his security clearance and his access to the research that had started. Everything. They lived off his savings, but money was running low. More troubling were the changes happening to Lyra and Zara. Living on Earth was affecting them in ways no one had predicted. Their glowing skin began to dim, and their abilities became harder to control. They were becoming more human-like, but losing parts of themselves in the process. "I can't see the future timelines as clearly anymore," Zara confessed one evening. "It's like looking through fog. The visions are there, but they're fading." Lyra was having similar problems. "My connection to matter is weakening," she said. "Yesterday, I tried to heal a wounded bird, but I could barely change its broken wing. I'm losing who I am." David felt guilty. His selfish choice to have both companions was causing them to suffer. He began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. The situation got worse when other alien species became aware of the Zephyrian presence on Earth. Late one night, their safe house was surrounded by creatures that looked like living shadows. They moved without sound and seemed to absorb light itself. "Shadow hunters," Zara whispered, her voice filled with fear. "They're bounty hunters who capture refugees from dying worlds. They must have tracked us here." The shadow hunters demanded that Lyra and Zara surrender themselves, apparently. Other alien civilizations saw the Zephyrians as valuable prizes because of their unique abilities. David and his companions were forced to flee again, this time with non-human pursuers. Jake arranged for them to hide in an abandoned research facility in the Canadian wilderness. The place was surrounded by electromagnetic fields that would hide their alien energy signatures, but living in isolation was wearing on all of them. David watched as Lyra and Zara grew weaker each day. Their transformation was accelerating. They were becoming more human, but at the cost of everything that made them special. He realized that Earth's environment was slowly killing them. "We need to go back," Lyra said one morning. "We're dying here, David. Our bodies weren't meant to exist in this reality for so long." "But if you go back, the experiment fails," David replied. "Your people will say that my choice was wrong." Zara took his hand. "Maybe it was wrong," she said gently. "Maybe we should have followed the old ways. Maybe some traditions exist for good reasons." David felt his heart breaking. He had fought so hard to keep them both, but now he was losing them anyway. Worse, he was causing them pain by forcing them to stay. But then something unexpected happened. While monitoring Earth's communication networks, they detected a message from the Zephyrian homeworld. It wasn't meant for them, but Zara's weakening time abilities allowed her to intercept it. The message revealed that David's defiant choice had created a revolution among the Zephyrians. Young people across their civilization were questioning the old laws and traditions. Some were embracing change, while others were fighting to preserve the ancient ways. "A civil war is starting," Zara said, her voice filled with sadness. "Our people are dividing into two factions, those who want to evolve and those who want to stay the same." David realized that his simple choice to take both companions had triggered consequences that reached across the galaxy. The Zephyrian civilization was tearing itself apart because of his decision. As their one-year deadline approached, David faced an impossible situation. Lyra and Zara were dying on Earth, but their people were destroying themselves because of the changes his choice had inspired. The weight of so many lives hung in the balance. "I have to make this right," David said. "I have to go back with you and face what I've caused." Lyra and Zara looked at him with surprise. "You will leave Earth forever?" Lyra asked. "If that's what it takes to save both our species," David replied. "I started this mess. I have to finish it." But as they prepared to contact the Zephyrians for pickup, David couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest choice was still ahead of them. The year of consequences was ending, but the real test was just beginning. The Zephyrian rescue ship arrived on a snowy night in February. David stood with Lyra and Zara in the frozen wilderness, watching as the familiar triangular craft descended through the clouds. But this wasn't the same peaceful ship that had first contacted him. This vessel bore scars from recent battles, and its lights flickered with an urgency that spoke of desperate times. Velter emerged from the ship, but he looked older and more tired than before. His glowing skin had dimmed, and his eyes carried the weight of difficult decisions. "David," he said, his mental voice heavy with sadness, "you must see what your choice has done to our world." As they traveled through space toward the Zephyrian homeworld, Velter explained the chaos that had erupted. The younger generation had embraced David's message of change, forming groups that called themselves New Evolutionists. They rejected the old laws and demanded freedom to make their own choices about relationships, careers, and life paths. But the older generation had formed their own faction called the Eternal Balance. They believed that abandoning tradition would lead to the destruction of everything the Zephyrians had built over thousands of years. "Civil war has broken out," Velter said. "Cities are divided. Families are split apart, some of our greatest. Scholars have been forced into exile. The very fabric of our society is unraveling." David felt sick. His simple desire to keep both companions had somehow triggered the collapse of an entire civilization. As they approached the Zephyrian homeworld, he could see the evidence of conflict. Some of the floating cities were dark and empty, others glowed with the harsh light of military installations. "I'm sorry," David said. "I never meant for this to happen." "I know," Velter replied. "But good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes. The question now is, what are we going to do about it?" They landed in what remained of the capital city. Half of the crystal towers had been abandoned, while the other half buzzed with activity as both factions tried to govern the same population. David saw Zephyrians' age arguing in the streets, their skin flashing with angry colors he had never seen before. Lyra and Zara were quiet as they walked through their former home. The year on Earth had changed them so much that they barely recognized the world they had left behind. "Look what we've become," Lyra whispered, staring at her reflection in a crystal wall. Her skin no longer glowed like the other Zephyrians. Her abilities were almost gone. She looked more human than alien now. "We're caught between two worlds," Zara added, "to human to fit in here, to alien to belong on Earth." David realized that their transformation was symbolic of the larger problem. The Zephyrians were trying to change too quickly without understanding the consequences. Like Lyra and Zara, they were losing their identity in the process. The leaders of both factions demanded to meet with David. The New Evolutionists wanted to celebrate him as a hero who had shown them the path to freedom. The Eternal Balance faction wanted to put him on trial for destroying their civilization. "We will hold a great assembly," Velter announced. "All factions will present their cases. David will speak for his choice. Then our people will decide the future." The great assembly was held in the largest remaining crystal dome. Thousands of Zephyrians gathered, their skin glowing with the emotions of the moment. David had never seen so many alien beings in one place, and the weight of their attention was overwhelming. The leader of the New Evolutionists spoke first. She was young and passionate, her skin blazing with bright colors as she argued that David's choice had shown them the way to a better future. For too long, We have been prisoners of our own traditions, she declared. This human showed us that there are other ways to live. We don't have to follow the same old patterns forever. But the leader of the Eternal Balance faction disagreed. He was ancient, even older than Velter, and his voice carried the authority of centuries. Change without wisdom is destruction, he said. Our traditions existed for good reasons. They kept us stable and peaceful. Look what happens when we abandon them: war, division, chaos. Both sides made compelling arguments. David listened as they debated the merits of tradition versus progress, stability versus freedom. He realized that this wasn't really about his choice anymore. It was about fundamental questions that every civilization had to answer. Finally, it was David's turn to speak. He stood before the assembly, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes upon him. Lyra and Zara sat in the front row, their transformed appearances a reminder of what change could cost. I'm not here to defend my choice, David began. I'm here to tell you what I've learned from it. He talked about the year he had spent with Lyra and Zara, about watching them slowly lose their abilities and their connection to their home world. He spoke about the pain of seeing them suffer because of his decision. I chose both of them because I thought it was the right thing to do, he said. But I didn't understand the full consequences. I learned that sometimes, even good choices can lead to unexpected pain. The assembly listened in silence as David continued. But I also learned something else. The problem isn't whether change is good or bad. The problem is how we handle change. Do we let it tear us apart, or do we find ways to grow together? He pointed to Lyra and Zara. Look at them. They're not the same beings who left this world a year ago. They've changed, and that change has cost them something. But they've also gained something, a new perspective, a broader understanding of what's possible. David walked to the center of the assembly area. Your civilization is facing the same choice. You can fight each other over who's right, or you can find a way to combine the best of both approaches. Keep the wisdom of your traditions, but don't let them become prisons. Embrace new ideas, but don't forget the lessons of the past. The assembly erupted in discussion. Some Zephyrians nodded in agreement, while others argued against his words. But David could see that something was shifting. The harsh divisions between the factions were starting to soften. An elder from the Eternal Balance faction stood up. What you propose sounds wise, she said. But how do we actually do it? How do we change without destroying ourselves? David smiled. The same way I learned to work with quantum equations. That seemed impossible. One step at a time. One choice at a time. And most importantly, together. Over the following days, the Great Assembly continued to debate. But the tone had changed. Instead of arguing about who was right, they began discussing how to move forward. Compromise proposals emerged. New structures were suggested that would honor tradition while allowing for gradual change. Lyra and Zara played a crucial role in these discussions. Their transformation had made them living bridges between the old ways and the new. They could understand both perspectives because they had experienced both realities. We lost our old abilities, Lyra said during one session, but we gained something else, the ability to adapt. Maybe that's more valuable than we realized. Zara added, I can't see the future timelines as clearly anymore. But I can see this. The futures where we work together are brighter than the ones where we fight. After weeks of discussion, the assembly reached a decision. They would create a new system of governance that included both traditionalists and reformers. Changes would be made slowly and carefully, with respect for the old ways. But they would be made. David's choice had indeed changed everything, but in the end, it hadn't. Destroyed the Zephyrian civilization. It had forced them to grow. As the assembly concluded, Velter approached David. What will you do now? He asked. You have given us a new path forward. But what about your own path? David looked at Lyra and Zara, then at the crystal city around them. I think I'll stay here for a while, he said. I have a lot to learn about this new world we're all creating together. The old Zephyrian leaders smiled. And we have much to learn from you. Perhaps that is the real lesson of your choice. Sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from following the rules, but from daring to write new ones. As the sun set over the Crystal City, David realized that his journey was far from over. He had made a choice that changed the civilizations. But now came the harder task, helping those civilizations learn to live with the consequences of that change. It wasn't the ending he had expected when he first saw those lights in the desert sky, but it was the beginning of something even more extraordinary, a future where the species could learn from each other and grow together. One choice at a time.